Black trash like you was born to feed monsters. With an icy smirk, the spoiled son of the town's most powerful man shoved a young girl into the pitch-black swamp where silent, hungry eyes were already waiting just beneath the murky surface. She had only wanted a quiet afternoon, but one dangerous secret had turned her into prey. As jagged jaws rose slowly toward her, the bully's cruel laughter echoed through the thick mist, convinced that the darkness would swallow her whole and erase her forever. But what they didn't know, something else was watching from the shadows, something that saw every second of it. And when that hidden truth finally broke the surface, it didn't just save her. It brought down an entire corrupt empire built on lies and privilege. Do you dare find out what secret changed everything forever? Hit subscribe right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless.
They called her Swamp Rat before she even touched her locker. Zara Caldwell didn't look up. She already knew the temperature of the hallway, eyes thick in the air, a few curious, most empty, some sharpened with quiet cruelty. She kept her head down, backpack loose on one shoulder, fingers wrapped around the battered notebook where she sketched birds, snakes, and insects from the marsh, things that survived without asking permission. It didn't matter how tightly she held it, nothing shielded her from their stares. Florida heat clung to her skin as she slipped out the back gate after homeroom, moving the way she'd learned to move, quiet, narrow, like a shadow pressed flat against chain link. Down by the county road, she spotted a turtle. Its shell was cracked from a passing car. Zara knelt, hands gentle, fingers steady with the patience of someone who'd learned how to tend wounds without being thanked. The world didn't notice. Then a heavy boot cut into her peripheral vision. The turtle spun across the gravel, tumbling into weeds. Laughter followed, sharp, triumphant, and Zara froze. Wyatt Kingsley stood over her, hands in the pockets of his varsity jacket, his smile pulled tight like wire. Behind him clustered Brock Renner, Jace Mallory, and a couple of girls in cheer uniforms, all smirks and raised phones. "Hey, Swamp Rat," Wyatt said softly, "running a rescue shelter out here or just playing with roadkill?" He nudged the turtle again, harder. Zara swallowed, words crowding her throat. "Please, just leave it." Brock sneered. "Did you hear that? The freak talks." Lila Morrison snapped a photo. "You're going viral, girl." Wyatt leaned close. "Funny thing is, most people avoid the swamp. You belong in it." Zara bent to lift the turtle, hands trembling. "It's just hurt. Let me—" Wyatt's foot landed between her and the animal. "Here's some advice. Mind your own business. People who poke around where they shouldn't disappear." He turned and led them back toward the parking lot, their laughter trailing behind them like diesel fumes. Zara knelt beside the battered shell, lips pressed thin. The turtle's legs twitched. She slid her notebook from her bag and wrote with quick, precise strokes. Location, injuries, time. The day stretched on, airless. In biology class, whispers flicked her way. She collects bugs, probably eats them. Teachers marked her absent-minded. She aced every quiz. No one cared. At lunch, she sat alone beneath a live oak by the fence, sketching dragonflies while other girls gossiped about homecoming, their cell phones glowing. No one joined her. Nobody ever did. Between classes, she threaded through crowds, a shove here, a crumpled note in her locker, go back to the swamp. She said nothing. Any reaction only sharpened their appetite. The final bell rang. A sudden clap behind her made her flinch. Zara hurried home, steps quickening until houses thinned and concrete gave way to green. The Caldwell house sagged at the edge of cattails, gray siding warped, screens rusted. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and old coffee. Elias Caldwell sat in his usual chair, eyes vacant, body rigid, the television hissing with static. Zara stood in the doorway, mud on her jeans, dried blood on her hands. "Dad," she said gently. There was no answer. She crossed the room. "I found a turtle box. Car hit it. I did what I could, but—" A loud bang outside cut her off. Elias bolted upright. "They're in the wire! Get down!" His voice thundered as panic took him. "It's just me, Dad. Just a noise. I'm home." He didn't hear. He was somewhere else, hotter, darker, where every sound was a threat. Zara sat beside him in silence as the room filled with his ragged breathing and the shadows stretched long. She traced the veins on the back of her hand, eyes burning. She'd stopped crying years ago. Now there was only the ache of being seen and not seen, needed, never known. Night crept in. In her bedroom, she wrote out the day, the turtle, Wyatt's threat, the taste of fear that never quite faded. Then a voice rose in her head, her own, firm and quiet. "Keep moving. Learn from the swamp. Survive." The next day felt the same, only heavier. Near the gym, she glimpsed Wyatt in the boys' bathroom, half lit, passing a folded foil packet to another boy. Cash changed hands. Laughter stayed low. Wyatt looked up. Their eyes met. He said nothing, but the promise was clear. Silence, permanent. Zara ducked away, heart hammering, lungs filling with bleach and fear. By the final bell, she knew where she could breathe. Deep in the marsh, beyond reach, backpack slung over one shoulder and notebook pressed to her chest, Zara Caldwell slipped out the back gate and followed the path into the drowned woods, searching for peace, stepping quietly toward something far darker.
Zara moved deeper into the drowned woods, every step softened by spongy moss and a quilt of rotting leaves. Out here, the world thinned. The shrieks from the football field, the neon hum of vending machines, the locker slams, all of it dissolved as a narrow blade of sunlight cut through the canopy, staining the ground green gold. She welcomed the quiet, her breathing slowing as the trees absorbed the last traces of civilization. She pressed on, boots sinking into cool mud, eyes scanning for movement. The swamp was the only place that ever felt honest, teeth and hunger, no pretense. Still, fear followed her even here. The memory of Wyatt Kingsley's stare lingered, sharp and invasive. Zara named it, boxed it, and kept moving, the notebook steady in her hand. The old flip phone rested heavy in her pocket as the path narrowed, half lost to ferns and twisted cypress knees. Her senses sharpened. A rusted metal sign, its letters bleached by rain, marked the edge of abandoned land. Beyond it lay a clearing tangled in vines, and at its center, a leaning wooden shack, half swallow but green. She paused, curiosity tugging at her ribs. This was farther than she usually went, but the silence felt almost sacred. She eased toward the clearing's edge, thinking of the rare heron she'd glimpsed weeks ago near the shed, wings pale as smoke. Then she heard voices, not bird call, not frogs, human, harsh, careless. Zara dropped to a crouch, breath locking in her throat. Laughter edged the words, too sharp, too confident. She slid behind a screen of palmetto fronds, heart hammering, and the clearing snapped into focus. Wyatt stood near the shack's door, posture loose in a way that meant control. Brock Renner and Jace Mallory flanked him. Two other boys, faces familiar from school hallways, always orbiting power, hauled a heavy duffel from the bed of a dented pickup. The zipper opened. White flashed, plastic bags packed with crystalline powder. Wyatt snapped his fingers. "Careful," he said, voice low, the swagger gone. "Drop it and you'll clean it up with your teeth." The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Brock cracked a joke about selling out of someone's minivan. Wyatt barely looked up, counting cash with efficient, practiced movements. When Jace hesitated, hands shaking, Wyatt caught his wrist and twisted just enough. Jace sucked in a breath. "Don't screw this up," Wyatt murmured. "You want your brother to graduate, or should I mention your side hustle to the coach?" Authority settled like a weight. Obedience followed. Zara flattened herself to the ground, peering through a veil of Spanish moss. This was worse than rumor. This was structure, money, threats, protection. She eased the phone into her palm, thumbs clumsy with adrenaline, and opened the camera. The world narrowed to a trembling frame. She recorded everything. A bag slipped. Wyatt's knife flashed as he sliced open the brick, metal catching the swamp light. Cash changed hands. Laughter surfaced again, thin, brittle. None of them felt safe. Only Wyatt moved like he belonged, calibrated to risk, comfortable in rot. Then the stillness shattered. A shrill digital chirp, small, insistent, rang from Zara's pocket. Her alarm. The reminder she had set for her father's medication. In the hush of the woods, it cracked like a gunshot. Everything froze. Bags stilled. A roll of bills dropped. Wyatt's head snapped up, gaze cutting across the clearing. What was that? Brock muttered. Jay swore under his breath. Zara slapped at her pocket, trying to silence the sound, but panic made it louder. Wyatt smiled slowly. He drew a slim blade from his belt, its edge catching green light. "I smell a rat," he called, voice soft and venomous. Brock and Jace drifted back, eyes flicking between the shadows and the knife. Wyatt stepped forward, boots crushing weeds with deliberate care. "Come on," he said. "You like watching? You like getting in other people's business?" Zara pressed back. Thorns snagged her jeans. The brush clawed at her sleeves. Through the leaves, she met Wyatt's eyes, burning with a promise that didn't need words. If she moved wrong, if she made noise, he would make it permanent. Wyatt jerked his chin. "Find whatever's back there, now." The others hesitated, then spread out, fear drowned by command. Zara rose in a single motion, phone clutched to her chest. Instinct took over. She ran. Branches tore at her, roots reached. She cut left, then right, counting steps without thinking. Behind her, boots crashed through undergrowth, shouts split the air. The woods erupted, curses, engines coughing to life, the furious thunder of pursuit, while Zara Caldwell moved the way the swamp had taught her to move, fast, quiet, and alive.
The first roots tore at Zara Caldwell's ankles as she burst through the undergrowth, breath searing her lungs. Behind her, branches snapped and boots thundered, the sound pattern unmistakable. Pursuit. Every impact confirmed the same equation. She was prey. Zara didn't look back. Looking back wasted oxygen. She accelerated instead, driving herself deeper into the lattice of brush where sunlight thinned into a bruised, sickly green. She forced her mind into function. Panic was noise. The swamp was signal. This terrain was a map she had memorized over years of quiet study. Every slick patch of moss, every nodding root, every false step cataloged and corrected. She cut left without hesitation, clearing a shallow creek in one hard stride. Cold, fetid water surged around her calves, stealing heat, stealing time, but only for a second. She climbed out, shoes squelching, heart hammering, momentum intact. Somewhere behind her, Wyatt Kingsley shouted, the sound stripped of swagger and sharpened by hunger. "Fan out! I want her found!" The words recalibrated the chase into a hunt. Zara plunged through a thicket of palmetto, letting the razor-edged fronds slice her forearms. Thin lines of blood bloomed, sharp and hot, but she didn't slow. Pain was data, not instruction. Her eyes stayed on the mud ahead, scanning for the subtle rise of cypress knees, places to step without being swallowed. Every few yards, she angled into denser cover, exploiting the swamp's geometry to break sight lines. Then the sound changed. A mechanical growl tore through the air. An engine. Then another. The sharp, predatory snarl of ATVs split the wetlands, echoing across black water. Panic stabbed, cold and clean. Zara adjusted immediately, ducking under a fallen log as her shoes skidded on a patch of sucking oil-black mud. She pressed herself low, using the log as cover. An ATV ripped through the brush to her left, tires spitting muck and water in violent arcs. Zara crawled, knees scraping, teeth clenched to hold back sound as she slipped deeper in the shadow. "Come out, Zara," Brock Renner jeered, his voice bouncing through the trees. "You're not getting out of here." Wyatt's voice followed, lower, colder. "You run, you die tired." The engines closed in. The ground vibrated. Zara's thoughts compressed into execution. She slid behind a curtain of Spanish moss and spotted it, an arch of ancient cypress roots spanning a patch of clear water. To anyone else, it looked like a trap, shallow surface hiding bottomless muck. To Zara, it was a bridge. She knew which roots were low there, and she sprang upward, feet finding the hidden crossbeams just above the ooze. Anyone chasing her that way would sink. She crossed in 3 quick steps, one hand catching a rotten branch for balance, then dropped down the far side, landing hard but upright. Mud streaked her jeans, sweat soaked her shirt. She kept moving, counting steps without conscious thought. Another ATV roared somewhere ahead, not behind, ahead. The realization hit clean and brutal. They were circling, cutting her off. Fear spiked, but she refused to purchase. She threaded between 2 cypress trunks, skirting the edge of a deep slough. Headlights flashed through the trees like furious eyes. Zara flattened behind another fallen log, barely breathing as 2 ATVs screamed past, one missing her by feet. Brock's laughter faded into the distance. She waited 3 heartbeats, then rose and ran along the spine of a low ridge, leaping over the bleached skull of a snake half buried in mud. Her mind cataloged continuously. Lily pads, don't touch. Floating cover over soft death. Stating north of the deadfall. Cypress roots are strongest. Don't run straight, never run straight. She angled left, feet sliding on moss and burst through a curtain of vines. Her lungs burned. Her throat felt raw, flayed. She risked a glance back. Nothing. For one brief, dangerous moment, the only sound was her own breathing. Then came another engine, closer, louder, a rising snarl that vibrated bone. Zara looked up just as headlights carved through the brush. She darted right, vaulted right at stump, and a foot caught. An old root, slick and thick as a forearm. She went down hard, knees slamming into the ground. Pain exploded up her legs. As she rolled, a sickening realization followed. Her phone slipped free, vanishing into the black mud with a sound too small to matter. She forced herself upright, but the timing was gone. An ATV skidded to a halt in front of her, spraying her with muck. Wyatt Kingsley dismounted slowly, satisfaction radiating off him like cold. He held something up between 2 fingers, a cracked phone, mud-caked, unmistakable. "You lose something?" he asked, stepping closer, boots grinding into the wet earth. "You really thought you could run from me, Czar?" His voice was pure venom now, eyes flat and unblinking. The others fanned out behind him, forming a wall, muscle, machines, certainty. Czar backed away once, then again, and felt the swamp close its perimeter. No paths left. Wyatt grabbed her wrist, fingers crushing bone. "Get the rope, Brock," he barked, never breaking eye contact. Time to pay the swamp a visit, swamp rat. As they closed in, Czar searched for an exit that didn't exist. Wyatt's grip was iron. The woods offered no intervention, only silence. They were taking her to what they called the junkyard. Zara knew it by another name, the place where nothing ever came back.
They shoved Zara Caldwell through cattails and stinking reeds until the ground softened and collapsed into a slick tongue of mud, sloping toward a pool the color of spent oil. Briars had already signed her knees, thin, burning cuts she felt only when she stopped moving. Wyatt Kingsley drove a hand into her shoulder. She stumbled, caught herself on her palms, and felt the mud climb into the lines of her hands, cold and intimate. Wyatt stepped around her, boots sinking, jaw set with a careful kind of pleasure. "Look at me," he said. Zara lifted her eyes. His face looked clean in the drowning light, almost boyish, until he smiled. "Please," she said, keeping her voice steady by swallowing the tremor. "You made your point. I'm not going to say anything. I want to go home." He laughed softly, like she'd offered a joke with a slow punchline. "Home?" He tipped his head toward the leaning pines. "This is your home, swamp rat." Brock Renner and the others hung back, feigning boredom, but Zara saw how their attention tracked Wyatt's movements. He rolled his shoulders and crouched so they were level. "You followed me. You filmed me. That's not a mistake I let people make twice." "I didn't follow you," Zara said. "I come out here to breathe, that's all." He leaned closer. "You think air belongs to you?" The slap came quick, hot, pointless. Stars burst behind her eyes. She kept her head upright the way her father had taught her when panic threatened. Count, breathe, anchor. Copper flooded her mouth, then dirt. She lifted her chin anyway. Wyatt smirked. "There it is, that little, what do they call it? Dignity. He tasted the word like it didn't fit. You don't get to have that out here. He grabbed her collar and yanked her up. Say it. Say you don't belong. Zara met his stare. I belong wherever the truth belongs, she said quietly. His laughter hardened. You hear that? He called to the others. The freaks of Poet. He slammed her into a cypress trunk. Bark tore her shoulder. She bit down on the sound. He crowded closer, breath warm and spoiled, and then the word came, thin and deliberate, slid across his tongue like a blade. The group shifted, some snickering, some frozen. The old, cold rage settled into Zara's ribs, bringing with it a familiar clarity. She took one breath. You think a word makes me smaller, she said. It only makes you smaller. You don't scare me, not with that. Wyatt's eyes flickered, surprise, then heat. His fist drove into her stomach. Air left her in a soundless rush. She folded, then forced herself upright. He struck again, shoulder, cheekbone, measured, controlled, not a fight, a demonstration. When he stopped, he stood very close. The knife he'd used back at the shack rested at his side, its point catching flecks of green light. Listen carefully, Zara said, fighting for breath. If you hurt me, you make more problems than you solve. I didn't send anything. You know why? Because I'm not stupid. But people talk. You do deals in school bathrooms. You run your mouth. One person hears you, and it's over. He smiled with his teeth. You think I'm afraid of talk? You should be afraid of patterns, she said. Kids with cash they shouldn't have. A certain car in the wrong place. The swamp remembers everything. So do people. He slid the knife close enough that she felt its cold on her throat. You know what I'm afraid of? He asked. Inconvenience. He tapped the blade gently under her jaw. And you are very inconvenient. I didn't tell anyone, Zara said. I won't. You won't, he agreed, head tilting. He stepped back, brushed imaginary dirt from his jacket, and nodded toward the dark water. Let me explain how the world works, Zara. My father runs this town, Sheriff Henry Kingsley. He smiled like a badge. When I tell him what happened, that you ran, that you were unstable, that you threatened me, he'll file paperwork while I'm eating dinner. Deputies will swear they saw you hitch a ride to the interstate. People will bring casseroles. The pond breathed behind him. A bubble rose and popped. They'll say, poor girl, then they'll go to bed. Zara swallowed the fear and kept her voice plain. You don't have to do this. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send anything. You can walk away and nothing changes for you. You keep your power. I keep my life. That's the smart choice. He paced a short line in the mud, trying on mercy like a shirt. The smart choice, he repeated, savoring it. Then he stopped and laughed, bright, empty, cruel. You're right about one thing, he said. You won't say anything. He lifted her phone between two fingers, the case cracked and slick with swamp. He squeezed until plastic snapped. The screen went dark like an eye going out. He tossed the pieces into the weeds. You won't say anything, he repeated, stepping back in, because dead girls don't talk. Wyatt's blade into his belt and seized her wrists again. It's over, he said, flat as a verdict, and dragged her toward the water's edge.
Mud oozed up around Zara Caldwell's shoes as Wyatt Kingsley dragged her to the very lip of the swamp. The stench here felt almost solid, a thick amalgam of rot, old water, and things that had died without witnesses. The ground sloped treacherously, sucking at her soles as if testing her weight, her will. The sky pressed low, heavy with swollen clouds. Nothing moved except a single vulture carving slow, patient circles far above. Wyatt's fingers dug into her shoulder, his breath hot against her cheek. Zara thought to keep her footing as her sneakers slid across a mat of black algae and scattered bone fragments bleached smooth by time. Behind them, the boys had gone quiet. Whatever bravado they'd borrowed earlier drained away in the face of what was coming.
The water stretched before her like a bottomless mirror. Bulrushes nodded in the breeze. Beneath the surface, something large shifted, silent, deliberate. A pair of glassy eyes surfaced for a heartbeat, then vanished. Wyatt smiled, intoxicated by control. He twisted Zara to face him, forcing her to meet his empty gaze. "You know what happens to loudmouths out here?" His voice softened, almost tender. "Nobody remembers. Nobody cares." Dizziness washed through her, terror humming in her bones, yet she held his stare. "Please," she said, "don't!" The word barely escaped before he shoved her hard, sending her to her knees at the edge. He leaned close, teeth bared. "You hear that?" he whispered. "That's the sound of hungry things waiting." As they're summoned, a corpse rolled to the surface. A dog, fur slick and gray, jaw frozen in a silent snarl. The current tugged at its broken limbs, drawing it toward the reeds. Wyatt laughed, wild and brittle, the sound of something cracking. "See?" he said. "They're starving. Fresh meat doesn't last long in the glades." Zara's heart hammered. The rot rose off the carcass in waves, a warning carried on the air. Somewhere nearby, a gator splashed, the vibration traveling straight through her ribs. She tried again, voice splintering. "You don't have to do this. I'll forget what I saw. Nobody has to know." Wyatt crouched beside her, lowering his mouth to her ear. "That's the problem," he murmured. "I can't take that chance." He paused, savoring the fear tightening her breath. "You want a secret?" His eyes flicked to the others, making sure they listened. "You think the swamp eats everyone? Some people get dragged here first." Then, just for Zara, he let the truth slip. "You remember Mr. Daniel Reed, the biology teacher? You really think he just left last spring?" His tone was almost playful. "People have accidents out here all the time." Zara's eyes widened, her mind racing to connect what she'd never dared to ask. She didn't get the chance. Wyatt shoved her with everything he had. For a weightless second, the world flipped. Clouds, cypress crowns, Wyatt's silhouette looming at the bank, then black water swallowed her whole. He never noticed the faint red blink, hidden deep in the shadows of an old oak. The wildlife camera, veiled in moss, recorded everything. The words, the blows, the moment Zara disappeared beneath the surface. Each second burned onto its memory card, silent and patient as the swamp itself. Cold clamped her lungs, stealing her scream as the muck closed overhead. Above, the last thing she heard was Wyatt's laughter. Below, there was only darkness, pressure, and the promise of hungry jaws. Every secret, every sin sank with her, and the water, as always, kept its truths.
The world went black, cold and dense, thick as syrup. Zara Caldwell sank, the shock of the water compressing every muscle, panic lighting her nerves as her lungs burned. For a split second, the swamp seemed to hold her, mud tugging at her shoes, icy pressure stealing direction and time. She fought upward anyway, kicking, scraping through invisible weeds until she broke the surface with a ragged gasp, hair plastered to her face, the taste of rot and blood sharp on her tongue. She swallowed the urge to cry out. Noise meant attention. Wyatt Kingsley still stood on the bank, a dark cutout against the reeds, his face twisted with triumph. He offered a last mocking salute and turned away, boots crunching, dissolving into shadow. For a heartbeat, Zara was truly alone. Then the water shifted. Something massive glided beneath her feet, barely troubling the surface. She froze and let herself sink a fraction, arms spread to keep afloat, legs still. The night crackled with insects and the distant grunt of frogs, but all she heard was her own heart, a frantic drum. Her father's voice surfaced, low, steady, teaching her years ago, if you ever fall in the glades, make yourself small, don't splash, don't challenge. She forced her body to obey. Every cell screamed to thrash, to flee, yet the shape drew closer. A broad snout cupped the water, eyes like polished stone, catching the faintest light. Zara's mind snapped into analysis. Alligator or crocodile? Details mattered. The head was wide and U-shaped, not the narrow V. The jaw scales were smoother. Old scars traced its hide, territory marks from fights long finished. It circled her, tail stirring the water in lazy, lethal arcs. Enormous, 12 feet, maybe more, muscle and hunger written deep. Zara didn't move. She counted her breaths, willing herself invisible. The animal drifted closer, eyes fixed. She noticed the bulge along its midsection, a swollen gut tight from a recent meal. Its nostrils flared, tasting the air. It did not lunge. Instead, it nudged her gently with its nose, a test. She did not run. Time stretched. A minute became an age. Lessons flickered through her mind. Books, documentaries, field guides read by flashlight under thin blankets. Alligators were efficient, not reckless, rarely aggressive when full. She held the thought like a talisman, not a threat, not food. The alligator regarded her, indifferent to fear or prayer, then turned away, gliding off. Its tail brushed past her knees, a whisper of ancient power, and vanished. Zara exhaled, shaking, nearly sobbing with relief. The monster had judged her and found her unworthy of hunger. Another danger arrived. Her own body failed her. Exhaustion crashed in like a wave. She clung to a drifting log, legs numb, arms screaming with cold. The far bank felt impossibly distant, but she gathered what was left and paddled, awkward, slow, steady through the oily film. Roots appeared. She grabbed hold. Every muscle trembled as she hauled herself out, skin scraping, fabric tearing, half crawling, half dragging up the muddy slope. Behind her, the alligator slipped beneath the lilies, gone as quickly as it had come. The water smoothed, erasing ripples. Above, the clouds parted just enough for a thin blade of moonlight to find her, trembling, slumped on the bank. Zara collapsed, gasping. Tears cut tracks through the mud on her cheeks. She stared back at the black water where death had circled and passed her by. Pain flared everywhere, every nerve raw. But beneath it, something else ignited, a furious, unbreakable spark. The marsh had nearly claimed her. It had also set her free. Her breathing steadied. Blood roared in her ears, but her mind cleared. She pushed to her knees, then to her feet, legs shaking. She looked once more at the water, a silent promise burning in her chest. This wasn't over. She had seen the wildlife camera blinking in the shadows, and she needed answers about what Wyatt meant, about Mr. Daniel Reed, about the lies that sank people without a trace. Dragging herself into the sheltering dark of the cypress, Zara moved forward. Each step was fueled by rage and resolve, for herself, for her father, for every kid left alone in the swamp. She disappeared into the trees, soaked and shaking, eyes blazing with a new and terrible certainty.
Zara Caldwell moved through the tangled brush on hands and knees, every joint screaming, clothes sodden and torn, mud crusted into each scrape like a second skin. The swamp around her felt altered, raw, darker, stripped of any illusion of safety. Somewhere behind her, insects droned and a hunting dog barked in the distance, a reminder that the marsh was never empty, never neutral. Then sirens wailed, shrill, urgent, impossibly close, slicing through the swamp's hush and freezing her in place. Zara flattened herself against the knotted roots of an old gum tree, listening. For a heartbeat, hope flickered. Sirens meant searchers, help. Someone who had noticed she was gone. She imagined breaking from the brush, waving, screaming until her lungs burned. A colder voice cut in. You saw what they let Wyatt do. You saw how nobody listens. Still she crept forward, belly to the mud, parting reeds with shaking hands.
The undergrowth thinned at the marsh's edge, opening a narrow view of the access road. Headlights flared in the gloom. 3 police cruisers sat idling, mud-splattered, engines humming. Doors slammed. Rough voices, joking, familiar, bounced off the trees. Zara's blood turned to ice. From the first cruiser stepped Sheriff Henry Kingsley, his uniform stretched tight across his midsection, eyes bored and unreadable. Wyatt Kingsley walked beside him, varsity jacket filthy, face clean and smug, untouched by consequence. Behind him, 2 deputies hauled out heavy black bags and shovels. One nudged Wyatt with an elbow. "What's the haul tonight, Golden Boy? Another deer?" Wyatt snorted, shaking his head. "Nope, nothing that innocent." The sheriff glanced at his son. "You sure about this?" he asked lightly. "Last thing I need is another mess like last spring." The words were casual. The meaning wasn't. Wyatt didn't hesitate. "I saw her go under. No way she made it out. Find the body, get rid of it. No witnesses, no problem." Zara bit down hard on her knuckles to keep from crying out. Her stomach twisted as the truth settled, heavy and undeniable. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a mistake. It was procedure. The deputies fanned out along the bank, shovels over their shoulders, black bags dragging through the mud. Sheriff Kingsley handed Wyatt a flashlight and a cigarette. The exchange was wordless, practiced. No concern, no shame. They weren't here to search. They were here to erase. A deputy called out, "Check the channel, boss?" "Check everywhere," the sheriff replied, spitting into the weeds. "Gators get lazy, might not finish the job. If you see anything, you know what to do." Wyatt smirked, hands in his pockets. "Told you she'd be easy. Rats never last long out here." The swamp seemed to tighten around Zara. She wanted to run, to scream, to force the truth into the open. Instead, she stayed still. One wrong sound and she would vanish too. Shovels scraped. Men laughed. Sheriff Kingsley's voice cut through it all, calm, efficient. "Bag up anything you find. No mistakes." Zara's vision blurred. The world reduced itself to 2 brutal facts. No help was coming, and no justice lived here. The search dragged on, slow and methodical. One deputy found the dog's carcass, laughed and kicked it aside. Wyatt didn't bother to look. The sheriff prowled the bank, sweeping his light across dark pools and reeds. Zara pressed deeper into the brush, lungs burning, tears threatening to give her away. With painful clarity, she understood she could never trust the law here. Not the uniforms, not the town's leaders, not the neighbors who would swallow every word that Kingsley spoke. She stayed hidden, barely breathing, until the laughter faded and the search party drifted deeper into the marsh, carrying their secrets with them. When darkness fully claimed the swamp, Zara made her choice. Summoning the last of her strength, she crawled away from the lights and voices, deeper into shadow. She circled wide, careful, leaving nothing behind, moving toward the only place that might offer shelter, home. She did not yet know that this retreat, born of desperation, was leading her straight toward a secret even darker than the swamp itself.
Night compressed around the Caldwell house, viscous and suffocating, as Zara Caldwell emerged from the tangled dark of the woods. Each step demanded arbitration between dread and depletion. Her limbs tremored with cold, skin was stippled with dried mud and blood, hair had stiffened into swamp-set cords. She stayed in the margins, pulse thudding with the residue of Wyatt Kingsley threats and the vacant authority of Sheriff Henry Kingsley and his deputies. She ghosted along the siding, flinching when warped porch boards whispered under her weight. A single anemic light flickered in the kitchen window. Through the glass, she caught her father's silhouette, Elias Caldwell hunched in his chair, head bowed, shoulders knotted, but the house felt charged, as if past and present were holding the same breath. At the back door she paused, ear pressed to peeling wood. Inside, the air carried gun oil and bleach. Television static was gone, replaced by a low metronomic rasp of metal on metal. She slipped in without sound. The living room looked unchanged. Frayed sofa, cluttered table, an old photograph of her father in uniform staring from a tarnished frame. But Elias was different. He sat at the kitchen table with sleeves rolled, hands moving with surgical calm as he cleaned a battered rifle that hadn't seen daylight in years. The light caught his eyes, no longer glassed over or lost, but sharp, calibrated. Zara hesitated in the doorway, a first aid kit hugged to her chest, watching him reassemble the weapon with the fluency of muscle memory earned and never forgotten. He looked up, sensing her. For a beat, neither spoke. Elias crossed the room and gathered her into a rough, wordless embrace. His body shook with silent sobs. "I'm sorry, baby," he breathed, guilt threaded with something older, heavier, shame, regret, love without a clean vocabulary. Zara held him until her breathing steadied. When she pulled back, she searched his face for the man from the stories, the hero, not the shadow he'd worn. He cupped her chin, eyes cataloging every wound. "What did they do to you?" Fury quavered beneath the question. She shook her head, voice scraped raw. "I'm okay." Then the dam failed. She told him about the swamp, the deals, the chase, the water closing over her, the alligator's judgment, and the worst revelation of all, the sheriff's machinery moving to erase her to protect his son. Elias listened without interruption. When she finished, silence settled like a held breath. His jaw tightened, hands flexed. Then a strange calm took him, the kind that precedes weather. "I wasn't just any grunt," he said at last, a bitter half-smile ghosting across his mouth. "Force recon, special operations. I did things I never wanted near you." He let it hang. "After your mother, the courts, the drinking, I thought if I played broken, trouble would pass us by." His gaze hardened. "I was wrong. I can't play dead when my little girl was nearly buried." Zara's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" He squeezed her shoulder. "I was trying to keep you safe." They knelt together. Zara opened the kit and cleaned the cuts on her arms in quiet strokes. The weight of the swamp pressed in. The laughter, the black bags, the shovel handles. Elias finished the rifle and slung it over his shoulder, standing to his full height for the first time in years. The years fell away. "We're not running anymore," he said. "You're not alone. You have me, and they don't get to do this." Hope and fear warred in Zara's chest. "What do we do?" Elias's grip was steady as stone. "We wait, we map, and when the window opens, we hit back, clean and hard." They crouched over maps beneath the amber glow of an old lantern, shadows stretching along the peeling walls. Zara changed into clean clothes, wincing, eyes alight. Elias pressed a battered radio into her palm. "Keep this close. If anything goes wrong, you run for the ranger station. No one goes there after dark. That's where I'll be." They held the silence. Then Elias pulled her close again. His voice broke, then steadied. "I'm sorry. Now give me a target, soldier." Outside, the night deepened. Inside the old house, purpose sparked and held. Somewhere in the sleeping woods, a reckoning shifted its weight and began to move.
The air inside the house had sharpened, electrically charged, like the seconds before a summer storm breaks. Zara and her father hunched over the battered kitchen table while an old lantern threw their shadows into towering distortions along the walls. The ache in Zara's muscles had dulled to a background hum, replaced by a steady, rising current of resolve that refused to let her rest. She set her mud-stained notebook on the table. "There's more," she said quietly. "Before he pushed me into the water, I saw something else. There's a camera trap in the old oak by the swamp. I saw the red LED blinking. If it was recording, it caught everything. Wyatt, what he did, what he said. That's proof strong enough to take all of them down." Elias listened without interrupting, jaw flexing as the calculus settled in. He tapped the side of the rifle once, thinking. "That's our leverage," he said. "Without it, it's your word against theirs. And with the sheriff pulling strings, your word doesn't survive a day." He looked back at her. "That camera could end their grip on this town." Zara nodded, fingers tightening around her bruised arm. "But after tonight, they'll lock the swamp down. Deputies, dogs, lights, they won't leave it sitting there." Elias's mouth thinned. He lifted a loose floorboard and drew out a deeper cachet, 2 battered radios, a coil of rope, night vision goggles dulled by years of use, a compass, a cracked lens flashlight, and an old Bowie knife with initials carved into the hilt. He checked each item with brisk, practiced efficiency. "We go tonight," he said, voice low and even, "before the fog lifts. Expect deputies, expect dogs, maybe guns, but they don't know that ground the way we do." He met her eyes and held them. "If you're with me, you follow my lead. No heroics." A tight smile crossed Zara's face, fear braided with adrenaline. "I'm not a hero, Dad. I just want this to end." He tossed her a radio. "Channel 3. Keep it on you. If we split, you head north to the ranger station and wait. Understood?" She clipped the radio to her belt, hand steady now. "Understood." The next hour passed in tense, efficient silence. Dark clothes, boots laced, a threadbare pack loaded with water, gauze, spare batteries. Zara watched as Elias pulled on an old combat vest, checking every buckle and pocket as if years had folded back into place. The stooped, hollow-eyed man she'd known receded. In his place stood the soldier from her earliest memories, back straight, eyes flint hard, movements stripped to intent. She slid the goggles over her eyes. The world shifted into green-shadowed relief, ghostly forms, edges breathing. Elias checked his watch and tied a black bandana over his hair, then knelt in front of her. "No matter what you see tonight, you keep moving," he said softly. "They expect panic. We don't give it to them. This swamp isn't theirs, it's ours." Zara nodded, catching her reflection in the window, battered, streaked with grime, eyes set with something unyielding. She didn't look away. Elias opened the back door. The night pressed in, alive with insect whine and a distant hound's cry. The moon was a pale smear behind cloud, just enough light to erase the path into darkness. They moved together, deliberate and soundless, each step chosen, each rustle denied. Elias led, silhouette dissolving into shadow, pausing to listen, to read the trees. Zara followed, counting heartbeats, cataloging sound, the snap of a twig, a far-off splash, the faint crackle of a deputy's radio beyond the next stand of cypress. At the marsh's edge, the old oak loomed. Through the goggles, Zara caught the faint blink of the camera's red eye. Between them and it, beams of light jittered in nervous arcs. Voices drifted, men laughing, cursing, calling for the swamp rat girl and her crazy old man. Elias raised a hand and whispered into the radio, "Shift left, we use the water, quieter." Zara nodded and moved as he taught her, low, patient, reading the land. Mud tugged at her boots. She slipped once and caught herself on a cypress knee, muscle memory older than fear. At the tray, Elias signaled her to hold. He climbed with unhurried precision, retrieved the camera, and passed it down. His smile was tight and fierce. "This is it," he murmured. "Tonight the swamp is ours. They think they're hunting us, but they're the ones in the dark." For a brief, dangerous moment, Zara felt almost safe, almost victorious. She secured the camera in her pack and met her father's eyes, soldier steady, exactly who she needed. As they melted back into the marsh, fear no longer pinned her. It burned clean, directional. In the darkness, father and daughter moved like ghosts, unseen, unbroken, ready to take back everything the swamp had tried to keep.
The swamp at night was a separate jurisdiction, merciless, uninterested, alive with the stored secrets of men and animals alike. Clouds swallowed the moon and left only thin, wandering slashes of light to silver the flooded ground. Insects stitched the air with a constant hum, but beneath it ran a deeper rhythm, a steady arterial throb of danger. Voices drifted between the trees, careless and confident, punctured by the bark of hounds and the metallic rattle of flashlights. Somewhere, someone whistled off-key, too relaxed, too at home in a hunt that had already crossed a line. Zara moved first, body flattened to the mud, senses widened until every sound felt three-dimensional. Elias followed a breath behind, silent, the night vision goggles painting the dark into usable shapes. The old combat radio at his hip hissed with faint static, and whenever a deputy's voice leaked across the channel, he froze, muscles locked, until the sound passed. They kept to higher ground, threading through knotted cypress roots and sawgrass tangles that punished noise and rewarded patience. Zara led by memory. She counted steps without moving her lips. 50 to the fallen log, 20 to the poison ivy, 3 left at the forked oak. The swamp's pulse lived in her bones. This was her map. Here she could make them vanish. Ahead, flashlight beams stabbed the darkness in jittery arcs. Deputies cursed as mud seized their boots. To the right, a dog howled, frantic, angry, nose burning on a trail. Elias touched Zara's shoulder and mouthed slow. She obeyed, freezing beneath a veil of Spanish moss. The men passed within yards, never looking down. One spat tobacco and muttered, "Why the hell are we out here for some swamp trash? Sheriff's kid can't even finish the job." Zara swallowed a bitter smile. If only they knew how close she was. They slipped deeper. The smell shifted. Less leaf and loam, more chemical bite. Zara wrinkled her nose as rot braided with something sharp and artificial. The ground dipped into pooled water streaked with an oily rainbow. She stopped and whispered, "Wait, look." Kneeling, she brushed aside grass. Rows of rusted barrels and plastic drums sat half-buried in silt, some leaking greasy foam into the water. Skulls and faded warning symbols stared back. Elias crouched, fury tightening his jaw. "Industrial waste," he breathed. "Not just drugs, they're poisoning everything." Zara's heart hammered. It made a terrible sense of the patrols, the secrecy. She snapped a photo. "We get this out," she whispered. "They'll have to listen." Elias scanned the trees. "Camera first. We're short on time." She led again, ducking vines, leaping stagnant pools. The old oak rose ahead, gnarled limbs reaching like claws. Voices sharpened. "Fan out. Someone's been here." A dog barked closer. Zara hugged the bark, palms slick, feet finding grooves she'd worn over 100 summers. She climbed, aching, scraping a knee, until she reached the thick branch above the clearing. The old wildlife camera blinked red, half hidden by moss. She freed it and fumbled for the card, fingers trembling with sweat and blood. The SD slid out at last, small, heavy with truth. Below, Elias scanned the ground. "Hurry," he hissed. Then a furious barking detonated beneath her. A German shepherd lunged at the roots, teeth bared. Handler crashing through brush as a flashlight speared upward. "There!" someone shouted. Zara pressed herself flat to the trunk, breath locked. Elias raised his rifle, not to aim, a warning line drawn in the air. The dog hurled itself again. "Come down now," a deputy yelled, voice cracking. "Don't make me shoot!" Zara slid the card into her pocket and clung to the bark. Above the noise, she caught her father's eyes. He gave the smallest nod, ready to run, ready to fight if there was no other way. Flashlights converged. The dog's bark climbed to a fever. Adrenaline roared. In the heat-thick dark, a single gunshot split the swamp. Then another. And the night, patient and indifferent, tilted toward war.
The world fractured in an instant. A concussive blast split the night, bark detonating into splinters as the dog snarled tore through the chaos. Muzzle flashes strobed the trees in violent white. Zara clung to the oak, muscles locked, until Elias moved, before anyone else could think, hauling her down from the lowest branch and folding her behind a fallen log just as rounds shredded the leaves above them. His voice cut through the noise, flat, precise, absolute. "Stay down. Don't move unless I say." Deputies fanned out, emboldened by numbers and noise, boots thundering through muck as they shouted over one another. "He's over here! Get the girl! Sheriff wants them alive!" A hound broke loose, howling as it sprinted toward Elias's position. Elias waited, measured. When the dog lunged, he swept a branch into its path, tangling the leash, then dropped flat as the handler stumbled forward. In one fluid motion, Elias rolled, trapped the deputy's wrist, stripped the weapon, and flipped him into the mud. The gun skittered away. Elias drove a knee into the man's back, twisted the arm tight. "Stay down." Another deputy rounded the log, flashlight flaring. He barely registered Elias before a palm snapped his wrist aside and an elbow crushed into ribs. The man folded with a wheeze and vanished into the dark, weapon lost. A third, older, slower, froze. "Jesus Christ! It's the crazy vet! Back up!" Elias silenced him with a sharp whistle and the steady rise of his own sidearm. He didn't fire. He didn't need to. The barrel held the truth. The deputy retreated, slipping, crawling backward. Elias worked fast, patting down the two unconscious men and tossing radios and weapons deep into the marsh. For a breath, the night held. Zara pushed up, clutching the SD card, adrenaline making her hands shake. "Dad, there's more coming." He nodded, eyes hard. "We go quiet. No more shots unless there's no choice." He knelt by the dog and murmured a low command. Confused by calm, the animal settled. Elias unclipped the collar, clicked his tongue, then hurled a rock far into the reeds. The dog tore after the sound, dragging its handler away as flashlights jittered in the distance and voices overlapped. "Over here! I heard something!" Elias signaled, and they melted into the brush, fast, silent. Zara trusting his reeds as a narrow ribbon of dry ground opened along an old hunting trail. Elias checked their rear, guiding Zara with near-silent steps as sirens wailed faintly, then closer. Deputies called for reinforcements. His senses were alive, every snap, every shift of wind parsed with the reflexes of a man who'd survived worse places than this. A branch cracked, grass shuffled, and he stopped Zara with a hand, pulling her into the hollow of a rotting cypress stump. 3 deputies blundered past, arguing. "He can't have gone far. Sheriff Henry Kingsley said bring him in alive." "You want to explain to the sheriff how you lost Wyatt's biggest problem?" One paused, squinting. "Hold up, that's Elias Caldwell. Old crazy Caldwell." The name spread like a curse. "He's moving too fast. Man's supposed to be broken. But I just saw him drop Tony and Rick in seconds." Doubt crept in. "You sure?" "Swear to God. Saw him on a rock. He's a ghost." Elias waited until their footsteps faded, then pulled Zara up and moved, faster now, layering trees between them in pursuit. They broke onto an abandoned fire road where a battered pickup sat half swallowed by weeds. Elias yanked a door, checked the cab, and waved Zara in. The engine coughed, then caught. Tires spun, then found bite. As headlights swept the ruts, Zara glanced back. Blue and red lights bobbed between trunks. The hunt wasn't over. She clenched the camera, eyes burning with fatigue and fury, while beside her Elias drove with jaw set, gaze flicking to the mirror as the swamp slid away behind them and sirens and shouts closed the gap. There would be no rest. Not yet. The truck rattled down the fire road, 2 fugitives racing the thinning dark, pursued by the lawless and the law alike, both unwilling to let go of what they had torn from the swamp that night.
Dawn never truly broke over Raven Hollow that day. Instead, a jaundiced haze settled over the town, bleaching the light into something sickly and thin. Sirens threaded the morning like barbed wire, blue strobes washing storefronts and empty porches. Helicopter blades chopped the sky while police radios crackled without pause, all of it threaded together by the sharp, omnipresent voice of Sheriff Henry Kingsley declaring every road closed until further notice. Suspects are armed and dangerous. Do not approach. His face filled the emergency channel, jaw clenched, eyes polished with manufactured concern. This is for everyone's safety. We can't have another tragedy. At the edges of town, makeshift barricades sealed every route. Deputies stood in clusters with shotguns slung low, scanning faces as if guilt could be read at a glance. Anyone who drifted too close, an old woman in a pickup, a trucker hauling oranges, was turned away without explanation. Inside the gas station, Zara Caldwell and Elias Caldwell huddled behind a rack of dusty chips beneath the flicker of the counter TV. Their names crawled across the screen in bold red: wanted, armed, dangerous. Elias's photo was a decade old, dress blues, back straight, eyes clear. Zara's was from last year's honor roll, her smile open and untouched. Both images had been repurposed into warnings. Kingsley's message blared again, looping for every household and storefront. Elias Caldwell, 49, suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, has taken his daughter, Zara Caldwell, 16, hostage. Suspect is likely armed. The final line landed like a verdict: lethal force authorized if necessary. Zara pressed her back to the cold metal rack, arms wrapped around her knees. Whispers rippled through the aisles. She saw the clerk's fingers hover over the silent alarm. Outside, a woman loaded groceries with stiff, practiced fear, eyes sliding away from Zara's face. Elias squeezed Zara's hand, voice low and steady. "Ignore them. You know who you are." Still, Zara's chest tightened, guilt and heat pooling behind her eyes. "If I'd kept my head down, if I hadn't—" she began, and he cut her off gently. "You didn't drag me anywhere. You stood up. I should have done it sooner." Through the glass, Zara watched two deputies escort a sobbing teenager from the pharmacy, Olivia, a classmate, while they searched her phone for any trace of Zara's name. The town had become a maze of suspicion. Drones buzzed the fields. Checkpoints froze traffic. At the sheriff's office, Wyatt Kingsley lounged behind his father's desk, boots hooked on a chair rung, studying a map bristling with pins. He flipped radio channels, voice lazy with triumph. "Told you, Dad, no way that old bastard slips us. The swamp only hides the dead." Henry Kingsley never looked up as he issued orders. "Block the levee. Search every outbuilding. If you see movement, shoot first. I don't want mistakes." Behind closed doors, neighbors whispered. Most believed what they were told. The news had always framed Zara as troubled, her father as unstable. The story swelled with each retelling. Not everyone bought it. An old man at the VFW shook his head at the TV. "That's not the Caldwell I knew." A girl from Zara's chemistry class frowned at the headline, scrolling back through messages that didn't fit the narrative. Doubt flickered, but it was a candle against a floodlight. The net tightened anyway. Patrols swept riverbanks, dogs strained at leashes, and by noon the radio announced school closures and warned that anyone aiding the fugitives would be prosecuted. In the stolen truck tucked behind the grain mill, Zara and Elias sat in the trembling silence between heartbeats. Elias checked his gear. Zara stared at her hands, mud in the creases, blood under the nails, the SD card burning like a coal in her pocket. Every misstep, every bruise of flight pressed in on her. "I never wanted this. I wanted to graduate. I wanted to visit Mom's grave on my birthday. I never wanted anyone hurt." Elias brushed hair from her cheek. "Admit you. Told us fight it. So that we can show them. Now you're waking up from the blank. Old Mill Road. Think about that and make sense. It's you,
to study 6 so that you can report on Kingsley. You to show them so that we can get this out before they catch us." Elias met her gaze, tired pride unmistakable. "Then we find a way. One more step." Outside, Raven Hollow folded inward, roads sealed, faces turned away. They were hunted, betrayed, alone. On every TV, their faces glared back. Inside the truck, something steadied. Zara closed her fist around the SD card, a single promise ringing in her chest. "We broadcast it," she said, voice firm now, "before they make us disappear." And in that quiet, desperate moment, a plan began to take shape. One last attempt to turn the world upside down, no matter the cost.
By the time Zara Caldwell and Elias Caldwell rolled to a stop behind the old radio station on Crooked Pine Road, the sky over Raven Hollow had curdled into gunmetal bray. The building crouched in the weeds like a relic that refused to die, a squat cinder-block shell with paint peeling and scales, and a rusted antenna stabbing upward, crooked as a broken finger accusing the clouds. An ancient pickup sagged in the grass out front, its bumper held on by duct tape and stubborn faith. Inside, a single bulb burned behind a dusty window. Elias rapped twice on the steel door, quick, quiet, an old rhythm meant for one man only. A heavy bolt slid back. The door cracked open to reveal Walter Walt Grayson, lean, weathered, beard gone more gray than black. His eyes flicked to Zara, then back to Elias, reading the damage without a word. "Jesus," he muttered, throat clearing. "You picked a hell of a time to show up." Elias managed a tired smile. "You always said this place was end-of-the-world proof." Walt snorted. "And you are always the worst kind of trouble." Still, he stepped aside, waved them in, and slammed the bolt home. Inside felt like a museum that time had forgotten. Tape decks, a battered control board, racks of dusty vinyl, the ghosts of call-in shows and midnight music. Walt hustled them into a cramped back room stacked with radio gear, MREs, and a scatter of old medals from wars nobody advertised anymore. "We don't have long," Elias said, urgency sharpening every syllable. "Kingsley's locked down the county. Roads, internet, news, everything but your signal." Zara pulled the SD card from her pocket, hand still unsteady. "This has to go out. It's the only thing that can save us." Walt's eyes narrowed as he took in the bruises on Zara's arms and the way Elias kept his back to the wall. "Whatever's on that card," he said quietly, "it better be worth dying for." "It is," Elias replied, jaw set. Walt dropped into his battered swivel chair, spinning dials and flipping switches with the muscle memory of a lifetime. He wired the main board to an ancient laptop, grumbling as it wheezed awake. Zara slid in the SD card. The screen flickered, glitched, then began loading files. Elias took position by the door, counting seconds the way training had taught him. Windows, exits, fallback angles. Each minute here tightened a noose. "Come on," Zara whispered as the progress bar crept. "Damn it," Walt hissed. "Kingsley's jamming the main tower. We'll have to use long-wave." He pointed to a squat metal box bristling with catched wires. "That reg'll bounce a signal past state lines, but it's slow and loud. They'll hear us." Zara met Elias's eyes. "We don't have a choice." Walt flipped switches. Feedback whined, sharp and anxious. Zara plugged in headphones and checked the files one last time. The wildlife camera footage played in ghostly silence. Wyatt's voice, the threat, the shove, the black water swallowing her. Outside, sirens drifted closer. Elias killed the overhead light, leaving only the sickly blue glow of the laptop. Through a slit in the blackout curtains, he watched 2 cruisers roll past, headlights combing the weeds. "Signal's live," Walt said, hand steady on the transmitter. "Now or never." Zara clicked send. The bar crawled forward, stuttering. "Why is it so slow?" she breathed. "It's working," Walt said, sweat beading at his hairline. "But if he's got a jammer van out there, it'll cut our bandwidth in half. It's a race, and we're losing." New sounds bled through the walls. Engines, doors slamming, boots on gravel. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle.
"They're here. Ain't much left," Walt murmured. "Keep pushing it." The progress bar hit 48%, then froze. "No," Zara whispered, fingers shaking as she tried to reconnect. Outside, a bullhorn boomed, Sheriff Henry Kingsley's voice, distorted but absolute. "Elias Caldwell, you are surrounded. Send the girl out and come peacefully. This is your last warning." Elias sit a hand on Zara's shoulder, gentle and solid. "Don't stop. They want fear. We finish this." Sirens multiplied. Red and blue light bled through the cracks. Walt swore as the signal dipped. "Almost there. Give me one more minute." A squad car slammed the porch, glass shattered. The progress bar lurched to 52%. "Last chance," Kingsley barked, closer now. "Send the girl out or we come in." Zara hit send again, knuckles white. The upload staggered, 54, 58%. Elias checked the exits, face drawn but unyielding. The world narrowed to static, sirens, and the thin line of hope crawling across the screen. The station seemed to shrink around them, every second fought for, every breath measured as the truth clawed its way to daylight.
Sirens screamed without rhythm, red and blue light washing over the radio station until it became a beacon of panic visible for miles. Every wall pulsed with warning, every window flashing the same message. The old order was closing its fist. Inside, the air felt razor thin. Walt Grayson hunched over the battered console, sweat carving clean lines through the grime on his brow as he shouted over the rising noise. "Zara, this is it. One last shot. The line's up, but you've got seconds before they kill it." Elias Caldwell didn't answer. He slammed another chair against the door, wedging it tight, then moved with grim efficiency from window to window. The rifle in his hands was steady, almost gentle, but his eyes were cold and awake. "We hold," he said flatly. "Nobody opens that door, not for anyone." Zara barely heard them. Her world had collapsed into the blinking cursor on the laptop screen, the faint whine of the transmitter tower, and the SD card burning between her fingers. She had already tried the federal uplink, watched it choke, get traced, erased before it could clear the county line. But when she hard-patched the laptop directly into the station's ancient transmitter, the local emergency frequency flickered alive like a stubborn heartbeat. "This'll put us on every screen," Walt muttered, fingers flying across switches. "TVs, radios, phones, everyone's gonna see it." He glanced at her. "You ready for that, kid?" Zara swallowed. Her voice came out thin but steady. "Ready as I'll ever be." Outside, deputies tightened their circle, flashlights slicing the dark. Then the bullhorn boomed. Sheriff Henry Kingsley, no longer pretending concern. "This is your final warning. Surrender the girl and the tape now, or we open fire." Zara's breath went shallow. Walt brought the emergency channel fully online. Elias checked his watch. "You've got 60 seconds, he said. "That's it." Her fingers flew. Code scavenged from sleepless nights and forgotten forums, stitched together under shaking hands, lines compiled, systems blinked. Then the screen changed. Red and blue banners flooded the interface, emergency broadcast active. Zara hesitated for a fraction of a second, then hit go live. Across Raven Hollow, televisions froze mid-sentence, radios cut to silence, phones stuttered and locked. The local news vanished, replaced with black. Then the screen tore open. Grainy footage filled every display. A timestamp blinked in the corner. The camera shook as Zara stumbled through woods, breath ragged, terror raw. Voices shouted. A face lunged into frame. Wyatt Kingsley, sneering, a knife bright in his hand. "You really think you can mess with me?" His voice carried, ugly and close. "You know what happens to loudmouths out here?" The image jumped. Black water, swamp reeds whispering. Wyatt forcing her to her knees, his mouth near her ear. "You want a secret? Remember Mr. Daniel Reed, the biology teacher? You really think he just left last spring?"
A second voice wavered in the background, nervous laughter cracking. Man, she's not getting out of there alive. Then the shove. Zara disappeared into the water. Wyatt's laughter rang out, short, satisfied. Static swallowed the feed for a heartbeat. Then the footage replayed, looped, unrelenting. Across town, people stared as their golden boy was stripped bare. Mothers clapped hands over children's ears. Teachers froze in their living rooms. The general store owner dropped his phone. Somewhere, a mug shattered on linoleum. Zara's voice came next, pleading, real, breaking. "Please, you don't have to do this. I'll keep my mouth shut, I swear." Wyatt grinned at the camera. "That's the problem. I can't take that chance." A hush fell over Raven Hollow. In kitchens, diners, the firehouse, the truth get rolling. Wyatt turned to his friends, face alight with mock triumph. Find the body, get rid of it. No witnesses, no problem. The screen split. Zara's bloodied face beside Sheriff Henry Kingsley's official portrait. A banner scrolled beneath. Wanted Zara Caldwell and Elias Caldwell. Truth revealed. Wyatt's laughter echoed through living rooms and storefronts, suddenly impossible to unhear. For a long, shattering minute, no one moved. Even the deputies outside faltered, rifles dipping, faces slack with recognition as the lie collapsed in real time. Inside the station, Zara tore off her headphones. Her heart thundered as she stared at Walt, then her father. "It worked! They know! Everyone knows!" Elias's mouth curved into the faintest smile, pride flickering beneath exhaustion and dread. But the silence outside twisted, soured. The bullhorn crackled again, no longer threatening, furious. "Breach! Breach the doors! Nobody leaves alive!" Boots pounded the porch. Glass exploded inward. Shouts tore through the night. The broadcast cut, swallowed by chaos. But the truth had already escaped, lodged in every mind, every screen. Zara gripped the console as the storm crashed in around them, the echo of Wyatt's words still ringing in her ears. The lie was dead. What came next would be paid for in blood.
The world collapsed into pure chaos. Sirens bled into shattered glass and shouted commands. Then the gunfire came, sharp, concussive, unforgiving. Bullets ripped through the thin walls of the old radio station, plaster bursting in chalky clouds. Zara dropped instinctively, dragging her father down behind the desk as Elias folded over her, one arm pinning her head low, his body taking the storm meant for hers. "Stay down," he barked. Command voice, absolute, cutting through the panic like a blade. The front door screamed on its hinges as deputies slammed rifle butts and boots into it. Somewhere behind the barricade, Walt swore under his breath, clutching the emergency transmitter as if it were a lifeline. The sheriff's last words still echoed in the room. "Breach! Breach the doors! Nobody leaves alive!" They hung in the air like a sentence already passed. Zara's ears rang as red and blue strobes washed the room in frantic pulses. On every screen, the video looped again. Wyatt's face pale, twisted, unmistakably guilty as his confession replayed. The truth was out. But outside, justice had curdled into vengeance. Elias never looked away from the windows, jaw set hard as stone. A round ricocheted off a filing cabinet and slammed into the wall inches from Zara's shoulder. She swallowed a scream. Walt tore open a concealed wall panel, revealing a narrow crawl space. "If you have to run, through here, leads to the tool shed." Elias shook his head once. "We're not running." He lifted his head just enough to sight through dusty glass. "We stand together, no matter what." The hinges gave. Deputies poured into the hall, boots pounding, weapons raised. Elias fired, once, twice, not to kill, just to force space. The deputies scattered, returning fire. Wood splintered, the doorframe shredded. Zara's heart hammered in her throat as she gathered the SD card, the camera, the laptop. Evidence tight to her chest, feeling the weight of truth as the last barrier between life and oblivion. A round grazed Elias's shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Blood soaked his sleeve, but he stayed upright, teeth clenched. Zara crawled to him, pressing her palm hard to the wound. "Dad, don't you dare!" He met her gaze, pain braided with pride. "I'm all right," he said, voice steady. "Stay low." Glass exploded as a deputy fired blindly through a window, missing Walt by a foot. The old radio man dove under the console as the transmitter sparked and hissed. The radio crackled. The sheriff's voice cut through the din. "All units, move in. Take 'em alive if you can, dead if you must." A battering ram slammed the side door. The building shuddered. Outside, the frenzy peaked, dogs barking, boots crunching, radios shrieking. Time compressed into seconds. Then a different sound tore through everything. The heavy, unmistakable thump of helicopter blades, closer, louder, drowning sirens and gunfire alike. The station trembled as rotor wash hammered the roof. Zara looked up, breath caught, as a searchlight ignited the clouds, white as noon, slicing across the battered building, every window flooded with brilliance. Deputies hesitated, weapons dipped, confusion rippled. A new voice seized the channel, calm, precise, immovable, ordering local law enforcement to stand down. For the first time, the deputies froze. The sheriff surged forward, shouting that it was his county, his call. The answer boomed from above, ironclad, declaring a federal operation and ordering immediate disarmament. Zara's hands shook as she looked at Elias, wounded, breathing hard, and he managed the faintest smile. "Told you," he murmured. "Sometimes the cavalry comes." She stared at him, mind racing. "How?" He squeezed her hand. "That email didn't just go to the bureau. It went to my old unit. Some people don't forget their own." Another helicopter swept in, markings blazing, more lights flared, agents in black armor rappelled onto the roof, sealing the perimeter with surgical precision. In the yard, deputies dropped weapons, some scrambling for cover, others sinking to their knees. The sheriff screamed into his radio, but his power drained away as neighbors, townsfolk, and reporters gathered, watching the untouchable, finally outnumbered and outgunned. Inside, Zara hauled Elias upright, his good arm over her shoulder. Walt pushed open the battered back door and waved the agents in. A tall woman in an FBI windbreaker strode through, eyes cutting through the chaos. "Zara Caldwell? Elias Caldwell?" Zara nodded, still shaking. The agent nodded back. "You're safe. We have everything." Floodlights washed the room as agents swept the halls. Deputies were zip-tied and read their rights. Zara watched as the sheriff was disarmed, shouting in protest, while justice stripped him of command under merciless light. Elias sagged against the wall, breath ragged. Zara clung to him, letting shock, pain, and exhaustion finally break. Outside, helicopters circled, turning the ruined station into a beacon. For the first time in her life, Zara looked up and saw a sky filled with something other than threat. It burned with justice, hard, sudden, undeniable. As the last corrupt badge was led away, her eyes filled with tears, not just of survival, but of victory. The world had changed in a single night, and for once, power came from above, not to crush, but to save. The balance had shifted. The hunted were no longer alone.
Floodlights burned the last of the night away as dawn bled slowly over Raven Hollow, revealing the battered radio station and surrounding streets in harsh, unforgiving clarity. The haze lifted, replaced by order imposed from above. State police, federal agents, and National Guard units fanned across the scene with disciplined efficiency, corralling deputies, sealing off perimeters with yellow tape, collecting weapons, voices, truths. At the center of it all stood Sheriff Henry Kingsley, once the untouchable sovereign of the swamp, now frozen beneath a searchlight, his badge gone,
wrists cinched in plastic ties, uniform smeared with mud and shame. The world he had ruled through fear and silence unraveled in real time. A crowd pressed against the barricades, old men in hunting caps, women clutching children to their chests, teenagers live streaming with shaking hands. There were no rumors left to hide behind, no whispers to dismiss, only evidence, only daylight. The truth stood naked where secrets had once thrived. From the back of an ambulance, Zara Caldwell watched it all unfold. One hand rested gently on her father's bandaged shoulder, the other clenched around the SD card that had cracked the town open. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with sweat and exhaustion, but her eyes were clear, awake in a way they had never been before. She didn't miss a detail as agents pulled Wyatt Kingsley from the crowd, hands cuffed behind his back. The swagger was gone. No smirk, no sneer, just panic. Wyatt's eyes darted wildly, from Zara to his father, to the crowd that no longer looked away. Sheriff Henry Kingsley lunged forward, voice breaking as agents blocked him. "That's my boy. He's just a kid. He didn't know what he was doing. He was manipulated, tricked." The lead agent cut him off with a raised hand. Calm, surgical. "Sheriff Henry Kingsley, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and accessory to attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent. You'd be wise to exercise it." Kingsley's face drained of color. In that moment, stripped of authority, he looked small, just another man who had mistaken power for immunity. A junior agent handed Zara a recorder. She hesitated only a second before pressing play. Kingsley's own voice spilled into the open air, flat, unmistakable. "Bind the body, get rid of it, no mistakes." The order he had given his son, clear, recorded, undeniable. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone spat near Kingsley's boots. "How many times did you lie to us?" a woman shouted. An older man shook his head, tears cutting tracks through dust. "We trusted you." Kingsley tried to rally, words tumbling out in panic. "I did what I had to, for this town, for my family. None of you understand." Wyatt broke then. "Don't listen to him," he cried, voice cracking, hands shaking violently in the cuffs. "He made me do it. He covered everything up. He told me nobody would care. He said it was for the family." His words collapsed into sobs, the armor he'd worn for years shattering under the sun. Zara stepped forward, her voice steady, carrying farther than she expected. "You both knew. You both hurt people. You thought you could bury everything in the swamp." She held up the SD card. "But the truth always floats." Kingsley snarled, rage flaring as his power evaporated. "You're nothing, Zara. You and your broken father are trash that should have stayed in the mud." But the crowd recoiled from him now. Eyes that once held respect turned away in disgust. His kingdom dissolved in real time, leaving only a man shouting into emptiness. An agent offered Zara water and a blanket. She shook her head. Not yet. She watched as Wyatt collapsed to his knees, cuffs biting into his wrists, exposed before the entire town. No one looked away this time. No one was afraid. The spell was broken. From the edge of the crowd, a school administrator met Zara's gaze and nodded. Quiet acknowledgement, long overdue. Reporters surged forward. Questions she barely registered. What happens next? Is justice possible here? Zara answered simply, "It has to be." Agents led father and son to separate vehicles. As the doors slammed shut, Zara caught one last glimpse of Kingsley's face. No anger left now, just disbelief and loss. Behind her, Elias Caldwell squeezed her hand, pale but smiling, pride shining through pain. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved us."
As medics lifted Elias into the ambulance, Zara climbed in beside him, the SD card still tight in her fist. The crowd parted as she passed. People who once whispered "swamp rat," now stepping aside. Eyes changed, some apologetic, some grateful, all altered by truth. The sun finally broke over the pines, lighting the wreckage of old lies and the fragile beginning of something better. Zara knew this wasn't the end. Justice had arrived, but scars remained, and healing would take time. As the ambulance pulled away, Raven Hollow watched in silence, knowing the town would never see itself the same way again.
A month later, Raven Hollow no longer felt like a town holding its breath. Morning light washed the glades in gold, polishing rooftops and the old water tower, chasing shadows from corners where secrets once hid. Spring had claimed the air, frogs singing in roadside ditches, birds threading bright notes through cypress branches. The weight that had pressed on everyone's chest had lifted, and at Crestview High it showed. Banners hung above the auditorium doors, Community Day, Courage and Truth, and rows of folding chairs filled the gym, packed with students, teachers, families, neighbors. Reporters lined the edges, quieter than usual, letting the town have its moment. In the front row sat Elias Caldwell, arm in a soft cast, posture straighter than it had been in years, hair neatly combed, eyes bright with something close to peace. Zara Caldwell waited in the wings, breath shallow in a borrowed dress, fingers tracing the corners of her battered notebook. She looked leaner now. The scars had faded but remained, small, honest proofs of survival. The crowd buzzed with an energy that wasn't quite ease yet, more like a town relearning how to meet its own gaze. On stage, the new principal, brought in from out of county to rebuild, spoke first. She talked about courage, about refusing to let silence shelter power ever again. "It's easy to promise never again," she said. "It's harder to mean it today. We mean it." Near the back, the former principal sat with his head bowed, one of many changed by daylight. Teachers looked different too, softer, watchful, aware of the cost of looking away. Then the town's new sheriff, freshly sworn in by the governor herself, took the microphone. Her uniform was crisp, her badge catching the light. "This town owes you more than an apology," she said. "It owes you a promise. From now on, every voice is heard." When the science teacher spoke, her voice trembled with pride. "Zara Caldwell showed us not only bravery, but brilliance," she said. "Her field notes and camera trap helped state university researchers reach a new understanding of our Glades ecosystem, proof that knowledge can be as powerful as any weapon." She gestured to a plaque on stage, the Zara Caldwell Environmental Grant for Courage and Curiosity in Field Science. Applause thundered. When Zara's mission was called, she hesitated only a heartbeat. Elias caught her eye and nodded. The room leaned forward as she walked to the podium, one steady step at a time. From the stage, she saw faces that once whispered "swamp rat," now clapping, some even standing. Leela Morrison wiped at her eyes. Brock Renner stared at the floor, shame written plain. Zara set her notebook beside the microphone and let her gaze travel the room, the new principal, the teachers, the students who had watched helplessly before. Then she found her father in the second row, pride and healing in his eyes. She breathed in and spoke, voice clear. "Nature doesn't care about the color of your skin or where you're from. It doesn't care how much you have or what your family did. Nature cares who adapts, who stands together, who survives." She paused. "For a long time, I thought the swamp was my enemy, but it taught me patience, resilience, the power of waiting for the right moment to rise." She let the words settle.
In the swamp, there are creatures that wait beneath the surface, silent, patient, never giving up. Truth is like that. No matter how long it's hidden, it finds its way back to the light. Her eyes lifted. Today we saw it. I hope we never turn away again. The hush broke into sustained applause. Tears glimmered on more than a few faces. Afterward, Zara shook hands with the new principal, the governor's aide, scientists from the state university. She posed for photos she never wanted, smiled for cameras that felt less like weapons now and more like witnesses. When the crowd drifted outside for lemonade and music, she slipped to the back steps where the swamp lay beyond the fence, green and gold in the sun. Elias joined her, sitting close, saying nothing at first. The silence between them was easy. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. "You took everything they threw at you and made something new out of it." Zara smiled, watching an egret glide over the reeds. "I couldn't have done it alone." He nodded. "None of us can." They watched the light spill across the water, the world beginning again. Frogs and birds carried on, unconcerned with human affairs, faithful to an older rule. Survival belongs not to the cruel or the powerful, but to those who wait, endure, and rise. Zara knew it then. No matter how deep the swamp or dark the night, sunrise finds a way. When it does, every secret, every scar, every hard-won victory shines. Sometimes the quietest voices lead to the loudest reckonings, and healing begins where secrets end.